At the end of May 1911, Olympic would be sitting in the dry dock at Belfast. The last pieces of the ship were being nailed into position. Olympic was now ready for her sea trials. A full 7 months after her initial launch from the gantry. On the 27th of May, an opening day was arranged to see the Olympic and to walk around her decks. They would charge 5 shillings for a walk around the decks. On the 29th of May, she would undergo her sea trials, where she would pass with flying colours. On the 31st of May, a celebration would take place. The celebration was a joint venture. This was the day that Olympic would officially be handed to White Star Line by Harland and Wolff. Using a thick layer of soap and tallow, a Titanic would slide from her slipway, stern first, into the Belfast harbour. Under the command of Edward Smith, Olympic would go to Liverpool for a brief stay, before going to Southampton to be loaded with cargo and supplies for her maiden voyage across the Atlantic. Titanic would then be pulled into dry dock for work to commence on the fitting out process. The launch of Titanic was not as prestigious as that of Olympic. Being the second in the class, she would be regarded as a follow-on piece. On the 14th of June, Southampton docks would be alight with fanfare, cheering. Olympic would be underway, leaving the dock for her maiden voyage. Heading initially to Cherbourg in France. There she would meet with 2 tenders of the White Star Line. SS Nomadic, which can still be seen today in Belfast, and SS Traffic. These would ferry passengers and cargo between Cherbourg Dock and Olympic. Due to the size of the dock being too small, and the Olympic being as large as she was, the Olympic would not fit there in the dock. Once all were aboard, Olympic would head to Queenstown, which is now modern-day Cobh in Ireland, where she would meet with 2 more tenders, PS America and PS Ireland. The trip across the sea, which lasted 7 days from Southampton, was vastly uneventful, apart from some rough seas which stripped Olympic of some of her paintwork. Olympic would enter the Hudson River and New York Harbor Pier 59 on the 21st of June. News of the crossing reached Belfast, where the work on Titanic was being carried out. The news was of a resounding success. Olympic would then make her return journey. She would complete another 3 uneventful crossings until disaster would finally strike. On the 20th of September, still under the command of Edward J. Smith, Olympic was heading on her 5th voyage. She would pass through the Solent and come up parallel to a Royal Navy cruiser, HMS Hawke. As Olympic turned to starboard, the wide radius of her turn took the commander of Hawke by surprise, and he was unable to take sufficient avoiding action. Hawke's bow plunged into Olympic's stern, tearing 2 large holes into Olympic's hull, one above the waterline and one below. 2 watertight compartments were completely flooded. After being patched up, Olympic would return to Southampton under her own power. After returning to Southampton, Olympic then went to Belfast for extensive repairs. These repairs took her out of action for 2 months. Parts that were initially intended for Titanic would be used to repair Olympic. This pushed the completion back of Titanic and subsequently pushing back the maiden voyage. An inquiry was held into the Hawke incident. It was said by the Admiralty that the suction caused by Olympic's propellers is what caused the bow of Hawke to be pulled into her stern. This would, however, be a foreshadowing of a future event which would later take place. Whitestarland and Harlander Wolff used the incident to their advantage. They would go to state that after surviving such a major collision and staying afloat, as well as being able to move under our own power following the incident, that the Olympic class was practically unsinkable. On the 24th of February, another incident occurred. While returning from her New York crossing, Olympic would damage a propeller blade. Once again, she would limp back to Belfast for repairs. One of the blades that was initially intended for Titanic would now be installed on Olympic. Titanic at this point was very near completion. In fact, all that was left was for her propeller blades to be connected and the last of her furnishings added. The 2 ships would sit side by side, a grand sight to behold. This, however, would be the last time the 2 ladies would sit beside each other. This incident once again postponed the main voyage of Titanic from the 20th of March to the 10th of April. On the 2nd of April, under the command of Captain Herbert James Haddock, Titanic was finally completed and undergoing her sea trials. The trials took 6 hours to complete. She would then head down to Southampton. Once at Southampton, Titanic would be handed over to Edward J. Smith, and Edward J. Smith would hand Olympic to Captain Haddock. Olympic would then head out on her next voyage. Although Olympic and Titanic were nearly identical and were based on the same core designs, a few alterations were made to Titanic, which were based on the experience gained from Olympic's first year in service. Most notable of these was the forward half of Titanic's A-deck promenade, which would be enclosed with a steel screen and sliding windows. This was to provide additional shelter, whereas Olympic's promenade deck remained open along its whole length. This was a major contributor to the increased gross tonnage of Titanic, which was 46,328 tons, whilst Olympic's was 45,324 tons. With this increase of tonnage, Titanic could now claim the title of the largest ship of the world. Additionally, the B-deck first-class promenade decks installed on Olympic had proven to be scarcely used because of the already ample promenade space on A-deck. Accordingly, Thomas Andrews eliminated this feature on Titanic and built additional enlarged staterooms with ensuite bathrooms. It also allowed the feature of the Café Parisien in the style of a French sidewalk cafe to be added as an annex to the a la carte restaurant, and for the restaurant itself to be expanded to the port side of the ship. One drawback of this was that the second-class promenade space on B-deck would be reduced upon Titanic. A reception area for the restaurant was added in the foyer of the B-deck aft grand staircase on Titanic. This did not exist on Olympic. And the main reception room on D-deck was also slightly enlarged. "50-foot or 15 metres of private promenade decks were added to the two luxury parlour suites on B-deck on board Titanic, as well as additional first-class gangway entrances on B-deck. Cosmetic differences also existed between the two sisters, most notable concerning the wide use of Axminster carpeting in the Titanic's public rooms, as opposed to the more durable linoleum flooring on Olympic. Due to an ongoing coal mining strike, the Titanic's maiden voyage was partially put at risk, because they could not find enough coal for her to make her maiden journey. So White Star Line took the coal from many of its other ships, including those of the Big Four. Any passengers that would be assigned to those ships would be diverted to Titanic for her maiden voyage. April the 9th, 1912, the day before the maiden voyage of Titanic, would be a potential pivotal one. Due to a staffing change requested by White Star Line, Officer David Blair, who was initially going to be one of the main officers on board the Titanic, was asked to leave the ship. In a hasty leave, he would accidentally take with him a locker key. The key itself was for a cabinet, the very cabinet where the binoculars for the lookout would be kept. On April the 10th, 1912, Southampton dock was once again full of people. People boarding Titanic, and people waving their loved ones goodbye. This was the day that the now world's largest ship, the Ship of Dreams, would sail on her maiden voyage. Although this was a momentous occasion, Titanic did not have as much of a fanfare and was not as famous as her sister as of yet. There was still a considerable amount of people at the dock waiting for the ship to move, however. At midday, the engines would roar into life, and being pulled by Titanic's mighty blades, pulled at the ships in the dock. The mooring cables of SS City of New York snapped and the ship started to pull towards Titanic's stern, in a very similar fashion to that of HMS Hawke with Olympic. Same captain, same error. The captain quickly ordered all stop, and the tugboats that were there to guide Titanic out of the harbour quickly jumped to action, stopping the New York from hitting Titanic. It was a lucky and narrow escape. New York stopped mere inches away from the stern of Titanic. After the tugs had pushed the City of New York back into position and another mooring line had been set up, Titanic would now start moving once again, this time by the power of the tugs. And Titanic was on her way by herself. Titanic would reach Cherbourg, France at 6:35 p.m. Here she would drop off passengers who were only going to France and collect more passengers and cargo for the rest of the journey. Most notable names boarding at Cherbourg would be Margaret Molly Brown, John Jacob Astor with his wife Madeline, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Lady and Lord Duff Gordon. At 8:10 p.m, Titanic's engines would roar into life and head out towards Queenstown for the next and final stop before heading across the Great North Atlantic for New York City.